Just mind-boggling stuff. I kind of want to springboard off of that thought here this morning. And in this passage that I read to you, 2 Corinthians, the latter book. 1 Corinthians was written to the Corinthian church. Many regard the Corinthian church as a backslidden church, a worldly church, carnal church, they call it. I've been in church all my life. I don't think I've ever met a church that's not got carnality in it. Carnality means humanity. I don't know if you're here, realize it or not, but you're human. So am I. And we're all in human nature and in human form, and we all fail. Paul is talking to this church, and in 1 Corinthians, he deals with a lot of issues that the Corinthian church has committed, and he's dealing with the behavior inside of the church house mainly, and how we should operate and behave ourselves as Christians, and does a good job of that. But many of the Corinthian people took it directly. The issue that most go to task, or that Paul took the church to task with, apparently one of the men in the church had decided to marry his father's wife. That's how the Bible defines it. And I don't guess it's his mother. Must have been one of his father's wives, or maybe I don't know. I don't know how it worked. It sounds bizarre either way in my world. But either way, this son had taken his father's wife, and the impression given by the reprimand of the Apostle Paul is not only this man behaved like this, but I think this man was teaching that this is the way you should do it. This is acceptable. Well, Paul says it's not acceptable, neither should it be done. In fact, that behavior shouldn't be allowed in the church. He told the church that, and the church's reaction to that will be what we've seen too often in our churches. Somebody gets an idea out of the Bible, and they decide that the church is now to be putting people out of church because of their behavior. Just for the record, let me just say this. Very few behaviors should cost somebody their ability to come to the church house. There just should be very few things, and those are pretty heinous issues, like that things that would put someone in jail stuff. The reality is this situation was misbehavior. The Apostle Paul told these people, get it out of the church. He told them in a dogmatic way, as most preachers tend to be. But Paul wasn't trying to be ugly with the people. He was trying to correct the problem. Apparently, in time, this man had gotten the message from the church that was delivered by Paul, and this man went out and corrected the issue. I don't know what that means, but apparently he had corrected the issue, so much so that he had corrected it and approached the church about coming back and being in the church house. And the church said, no, we're not having you around here at all. Go away. The man had repented, gotten it right, and tried to do it right, and now the church won't have anything to do with him. Paul here in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, I think, kind of hones in on that, and he explains to the people, I came to you in the first epistle, my first letter to you, with tears. I was weeping as I was writing this. I wasn't wanting you to go destroy an individual because of misbehavior. I was trying to get the misbehavior corrected. As is corrected, then he's repented, you correct it, he's corrected it, you allow him back in, and go on from there. And so he's trying to teach the people something, and in 2 Corinthians, that's kind of the slant, if you will, of the book of 2 Corinthians. And then he gets here to chapter 11 of 2 Corinthians, and he takes on a different approach, if you will. And he tries to, because apparently some people in the Corinthian church was basically saying, why should we listen to this Paul? Who is this Paul fella? Now, Paul had spent a couple of years in Corinth, more than any other church that he had gone and worked at. He had worked a job there as a tent maker, and he had worked in that ministry exclusively for a couple year period of time, extended period of time. And he had invested himself, and he loved these people, and he wanted to help them. But now you have some people in the church that rise up. Who is this Paul? We shouldn't listen to him. And so Paul is trying to argue, if you will, and take these people on and give, if you will, kind of a resume as to why he should be put in position to say the things he said in 1 Corinthians and even 2 Corinthians. He's trying to give some credibility to himself. And here in this chapter, he takes on these enemies, these people. I like to refer to this. Paul uses sarcasm. I'm glad he did. Because my dad and his dad, my dad's dad, was very sarcastic / mean. His sarcasm had transitioned over into the meanness, and Grandpa could rip your face off. He didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't care if you cried. He didn't care. He was pretty cutthroat when it came to verbally. Now, he didn't physically fool with you, but he would just verbally just rip you apart. And my dad gained a lot of that, I think, from his dad. And my dad is sarcastic, but majority of the time, my dad's sarcasm is humorous. And he has a funny side, and he usually lets you know that he's joshing with you. Just for the record, those of you that knew him after he had had a stroke and a heart attack and open heart surgery. Things changed. When I was a kid, Dad tended to be more like his father than like the man you knew. The man you knew he would let you know he was cutting up and funning. The man I knew growing up, he didn't fun. It wasn't a whole lot of fun. And now when it was vacation time, that was fine, and he'd fun that way. But when anything that he didn't line up with, there wasn't a whole lot of fun involved. And certainly when you crossed him, you were in trouble. I'm just telling you, you were in trouble. And Dad let you know you were in trouble. He didn't even have to touch you to know you knew you was in trouble. By the time he got to the touching, it was really bad. But he let you know, and that's how my dad. But sarcasm has permeated my whole family. And I guess I've got a touch of that. Laura tells me sometimes I get mean with it. I try not to be. But I have some sarcasm, and I fun with people. And of all the people, and many of you don't know this, but I'm telling you, the most sarcastic one of my 3 kids is not Sam, though he can hold his own pretty good. He did pretty good up here, and he does pretty good. Nettie, not real good at it. She tries. Once in a while, she'll come in with a good zinger, but Jeannie, outstanding. Jeannie, as sweet a girl as she is, quiet, and you think she's just a doll. And most of you, if I said, what do you think of Jeannie? You'd say, oh, she's just a sweetheart. She's just a loving child. She is wicked, vicious, and vile with her language. When she's at home with her father, sometimes I call her up and say, how you doing, baby? What's that matter to you? I mean, really, baby? I'm trying to talk to my kid here. And but she's so I like sarcasm. I think Paul's using some sarcasm here in this exchange here in chapter 11. And so as you read it, if you read through it, we're just going to kind of focus on the end. But Paul's trying to explain that there are people that are after him, and there are people trying to discredit him. And Paul's worked very hard, especially in the church at Corinth, to try to make a name for himself and do right and lead the church in the right way. And in the first couple of verses, we find that Paul gives a purpose to God's people. Paul said, in essence, in the first couple of verses there, he says he takes the people where they are. He said, I've endured this to reach you with the truth. In other words, he's gone to where the people are. I mentioned it in Sunday school this morning when we were talking. Too often in church house, we try to get somebody. They'll come to the church. We try to win them to the Lord. That's what we should do. We want them to get saved first and foremost. Why? Because that's eternal security. We've taken care of their lost soul. We want that cared for. But too often in the church house, when somebody gets saved, we bring them into the church house, and then we instantly expect them to be a 20-year-old veteran Christian with all the bells and whistles. They know what tithing means, and they know that they're supposed to give 20, 30, 40, 50% in the offering plate. They know they're supposed to walk in with a certain behavior, a certain dress about them, a certain look about them, a certain talk about them, a certain walk about them. We expect an instantaneous transition from one degree all the way 180 degrees to another degree. The problem is that's not reality. The problem is that's not what's going to work. The truth is, just as a baby, I used Liam as an illustration this morning. Just as little Liam, he's not figured out. I was telling everyone that he dropped his pacifier right here on his little chest right here. And his pacifier was there. His hands were up here. And he looking, you could see him, he's looking, he knows where it went. But his head don't work good enough. He can't drive his head good enough to get it down there. His hands all don't work very good. Every once in a while you can get him to grab your finger, but he's not real good with his hands, and his feet are pretty useless. And he's sitting there in frustration trying to get that. The truth is, the Bible refers to us as children, and the truth is, when we get saved, we're in that same condition. We've got something, we just don't know what to do with it, and that's what salvation is. And what we need to do is we need to work to find a way as Christians, and those of us who have been down the road, we should, instead of running up to people, and we've all visited a church like that. We've been a part of people, Christians, that behave like this. Well, you don't behave like the Bible tells us to. Get out of here. And it's happened, and some of us have seen people pushed out. I've knocked on doors of people's houses. I'll never go to a church house again. I went here, and the church, they said, you're supposed to behave like this. And I went home and lived right down the road from that person. I drove past their house, and they were behaving just like they told me not to. Never go back into church again. Church is full of hypocrites. That's what they say. Just for the record, yes, it is. Whenever there's a human being around, there's a hypocrite around. Just saying. I'm just being honest. To figure, when I'm up here, somebody I preach something, and every once in a while I'll mess up and say something or do something, and my wife will call me on it. God bless my lovely wife. She's a wonderful treasure. And she'll call me on my failure. She says, well, that isn't what how my preacher said to behave. Really? So you're going to carry it there? Give me a break, you know. And she does that, and you say, well, that's just silliness. The reality is that's how humanity is. 1 minute we got it right, next minute we don't. 1 minute we're walking right, next minute we're falling down. I mean, it's just humanity. And Paul's saying, I'm dealing with humanity here. And he's saying, I'm trying to work with people. And then he gets down in the second part of the chapter, and he starts to instruct these Corinthian people that there are people like that will attack the church. And they will try to do things to get you off base. And the reality is that the truth is that Paul is going to give his credentials here. The latter part of this chapter here. And in giving his credentials, he lays it out in verse 18, seeing that many glory after the flesh, I will glory also. In other words, he's saying, okay, if some people say that they're super Christian, let me explain to you where I am in my life and what I've been through. For ye suffer fools gladly, seeing ye yourselves are wise. For ye suffer if a man bring you into bondage, if a man devour you, if a man take of you, if a man exalt himself, if a man smite you in the face. So what he's saying is, you might have experienced setbacks, and these people are saying, well, the Christians treated me bad, so I'm done with them. Verse 21, as I speak concerning reproach, as though we had been weak, howbeit whereinsoever any is bold, I speak foolishly, I am bold also. Here, are there any Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. So Paul says, okay, I'm where you are. I'm just a guy. What he's saying here, he's saying, I'm just a man. And he's saying that we all will go through things for Christ. We all will. Once we're saved, there may be things, bumps in the road that we will have to experience. And the Bible instructs us, and we've looked at that through the years at different places, where the Bible says and teaches us that we're to take those instances and issues that happen to us in our lives and endure them and get through them. Why? Because someone somewhere down the road is going to be going through a similar situation. Now I can help them go through that situation. The reality is, the beauty of the Christian life is it's something that just keeps going and going and going and going. Those things, and he goes on, he said, those things can't compare. In other words, he says, have you all gone through troubles? Have you all been through situations? Let me give you some of my testimony. In verse 23, it says, for they are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequent, in deaths oft. Of the Jews 5 times, listen to this, 5 times I received 40 stripes, save one. Thrice was I beaten with rods. Once was I stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck, a night and a day, and I have been in the deep. In journeyings often in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and painfulness, in watchings often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Besides those things that are without, that which cometh upon me daily, the care of the church. What he's saying here is I've been through a lot in my life. And he has every right to bellyache and complain and whine and fuss. Woe is me. Has every right. Paul has every right to do that. But here as we read the passage, he goes through and he says in verse 29, who is weak and I am not weak? Who is offended and I not burned? If I must needs glory, I will glory of the things which concern my infirmities. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, which is blessed forevermore, knoweth that I lie not. And then he goes on another explanation of this problem that he has. What's Paul doing? Paul's trying to lay out for us as Christians the reality that problems are going to happen. Difficulties will come to life. It doesn't matter. Listen, this is going to be a shock to all of us. It doesn't matter if you're saved or not saved. Difficulty is going to come. The problem we have in our Christian life too often when the difficulty comes, we blame God because now we're educated. We know God's in control. Well, God's always in control. Whether we're saved or not, God's in control. Whether we're saved or not, there's going to be problems. Did you know that if a saved person stumps his toe real hard, it hurts probably just as bad as if an unsaved person stumps their toe? It's the same thing. I broke my ankle in 3, they said I broke it in 3 places and cracked my, what do you call that? Heel. Cracked my heel bone and dislocated it. One fall. One time I fell, kaboom, there it goes. Ankle shot. And they said, I told the doctor, I said, just put a cast on it, I got to go to church. And it was Thursday. I had to go to visitation. I had to. And he's, no, I ain't going to put a cast on. I'm going to cut you open. I don't want to be cut open. He said, if I don't cut you open, you won't be walking in a year. And so they went in. They put bolts and pins and pinned this stupid thing all together. And, of course, here now 4 surgeries later, and there's the foot that I have. It hurts when I walk still. Still hurts when I walk. Sometimes when I sleep. Sometimes when I breathe. It hurts. It bothers me. It's very annoying. In fact, I have gone to doctors at Vanderbilt requesting amputation. You say you wouldn't do that. I did it. Serious as a heart attack. And if they'd have scheduled the surgery, I'd have been there. You say, that's dumb. No, it ain't. I want one of them bouncy feet. I'm going to get a bouncy leg, and I'm going to go to the Olympics, and I'm going to win a gold medal. That's the plan. And but I may, my concern with that, if I only get one bouncy leg, I'm probably in trouble. You know, because the one step would be normal, the second step through the ceiling. I don't know that would be a good idea. But seriously, it gets that annoying and painful. But you know what? I've gone to folks that have had foot pain, and I've been able to say, yeah, I can understand foot pain. I can understand. Why? God took me through an issue. Saved or unsaved, my ankle would have hurt. Saved or unsaved, my foot would probably hurt today. Doesn't matter. But the greatness of salvation is now I'm not alone. And now I have purpose for that broken ankle. I don't like it. And as I said earlier, if I'm ever running, you know something big's coming because it ain't. And the real bad thing is if both of us are running and I'm beating you, you need to get into shape. That's all I'm saying. Because these legs are pretty shot right now, I'm telling you. And I try real hard. I take great pains. Laura knows this, and my kids do. I don't limp on purpose. And every once in a while, if you'll watch later in the day, you'll see me have a little gimp in my step. But I'll ask Laura periodically, am I limping today? And she'll say, yes, and I'll work on it. You say, why? Because I don't want to limp. Why? Because I don't want to walk around with a limp. Why? I don't want to. I don't know why. It's a psychological thing with me. So I work hard not to limp. But in doing so, like when when my foot was recovering from surgery, I would walk really slow in the store. And Laura's like, you know, it's not going to hurt less when you walk slow. And I said, I know, but I will limp less if I walk slow. So I walked slow. When I first got out of surgery, I walked by. This guy had to be 85. And he went running past me. I'm walking with my wife, holding her hand. We're just walking real slow like this. And he goes zipping past me. I mean, just like, I looked over at my wife, said, show off. It's pitiful when old people, like, you know, their number's not 5, it's on up. And they can run past me. It's scary, it's intimidating, all that stuff. But why would God, you know what? I can deal with the hurt that comes my way if I realize God has a plan for that hurt. Now, we're here today, and this week has been hurtful in a lot of ways. And we've had some of our very own people spend time in hospitals, ICU, Bud's in there right now. Some of you are going through struggles and situations and problems in your life. And you say, boy, this is frustrating. I'm just going to give up. I think God sent me here today with the message, don't. God's got purpose for you going through it. I don't understand it. I can't explain. That's one of the most frustrating things about my position. People come to me in their times of difficulty and trial, and they ask me, how do I get through this? I don't know. Really, I don't. But I know a God that says, I'll be there with you. I can take you to almost a whole book in the Bible, the book of Psalms, and you can go in there and you can find that in the darkest days of the life of David, God was with him. You could read the beginning of a psalm and you can see that that the psalmist, the writer David, is so frustrated with life. He even says, I don't need to be alive. Forget this. And by the end of that chapter, just in those few verses, God's come to him and delivered a message to his heart and encouraged his heart. And by the end, he's praising the Lord. How do you do that? That's what God wants us Christians to carry to this lost and dying world. Our world is petrified of this virus. And can I say, we as Christians, we're just as human as the world is. We're petrified of this virus. We don't want to fool with it. We don't want the side effects. We don't want the problems. We don't know. Science don't even know what's going on with it. But if we get it, God give it to us for a reason. And if we realize God's there with us and God will get us through it, and even in the darkest of days, we're never alone. If we come to that grip and that reality, when we're on the good side of it, looking back, we can tell people, you know, it was dark days. Man, I struggled. I didn't think I could make it. But you know what? I made it through this. I can make it through that. You can make it through that. The truth is, God gives Christians, it's an avenue. I promise you, it's an avenue for us to get the gospel into people. What do you mean? When people see us struggle through life, and we do, and they see that we can struggle through life and still be happy. We can struggle through life and still make it. I promise you, I've been to funerals of people who nobody knew if they were saved or not. I've heard mamas scream out in agony, not knowing if they'll ever see their baby again. I've heard that. It's a very different thing to go to a funeral of somebody that's saved and the family knows it. Oh, there's heartache. There's some crying. There may be even some wailing going on, but it's different. It's different because we know that we'll see him again. We know this isn't it. And in reality, when we are given these issues of life, these difficulties in life that God brings to each one of us, and just for the record, my package of things I have to deal with are different than your package. And I may not understand your package of issues that you deal with because mine are different. But the truth is, I've been through enough in this life that I know that God is real. And I know that God will help and God will be there and God will carry you through. I was going to get into my testimony today just a little bit because I'm afraid that some of you newer to the church don't know about my issue. But when I was a 21-year-old man, I thought I had it together. In fact, let me go back a year or two earlier when I was 18, graduating high school. I went from there, I went down to Pensacola Christian College. But before I went to my dad and I said, Dad, which Bible college you want me to go to? My dad looked at me and he said, son, I want you to go to Hyles-Anderson College. That's where I went. It's a Bible college. And I said, okay. And then about the time he and I had had that conversation, we had a group come through the church from Pensacola Christian College. And so I listened to them. They were cute girls. I was human. There's a group of cute girls saying good. They talked to me about going to college. I said, well, my dad's talked to me about going to Hyles-Anderson. What do you think of coming to PCC? And I said, okay, I shall. Where's it at? Pensacola, Florida. I went to Dad and I said, Dad, these ladies are talking to me about going to this Pensacola Christian College. Yeah, he said, that's a good school. I said, would you be mad at me if I went to Pensacola? No, son, that's a good Christian college. He says, no, I wouldn't be mad at you at all. Okay. I'd rather you go to Hyles-Anderson, but I lived in the Hammond, Indiana area. If you've never been, how many of you have never been to Hammond, Indiana? You don't know where Hammond, Indiana is. How many of you know where Chicago, have been to Chicago, Illinois? You've been to Chicago, Illinois. Okay. Hammond is just a southern suburb of Chicago. It looks like Chicago, acts like Chicago, smells like Chicago. The only thing that smells worse is Gary, Indiana, right next door. It smells worse. You can smell it. I'm talking, Brother Gordy's here, my witness. You drive by it, and you know you're in Gary, Indiana. You don't have to see it. You smell it. I don't know why. Nobody knows why. But it's true. I'm just telling you the truth. I know. Indiana, Pensacola. White sandy beaches, Pensacola. Indiana, right by Chicago. Y'all know what lake effect snow is? Lake effect snow is the worst possible thing ever created to man. Lake effect snow means that our street can have 3 feet of snow and 3 streets down can have nothing. It means it's probably 20 to 30 degrees when the snow's falling. But by nightfall, it will drop down into below. And below is where you never want to go. With a 40-mile-an-hour wind off the lake. Yes, I forgot. I chose Florida. I went to Florida, went to Pensacola. I was a machinist. I already had the machine operator, could go down there and get a job. There's no machining jobs down in Pensacola. It's not industry down there. It's whatever that other stuff's called, where you go and get entertained and stand on the beaches. That's what goes on there. Tourism, thank you. I chose tourism over Chicago. I went down there, couldn't find a job, ended up flipping burgers at Burger King. They don't flip them, they just send them on a conveyor. It goes through. But I worked at Burger King for that 6 months. Barely made it through school. Wouldn't have made it if my mom and dad hadn't bailed me out, and they helped pay me my bill. And at the end, I wasn't going to keep sucking dad's money. I went home. I defeated, whipped. I went home, and I got back to work, and I was a good guy. I really was. I went to church. I helped build a bus route, worked the bus route, and was a part of junior church, went out visiting on Saturday. I was a part of the church. I was there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. We lived just down the road from the church. I worked about an hour away. I'd get out of work. I'd race home, jump into clothes, and run over to church and be at church activities all the time. I was a good guy. My lovely wife and I got married. She was 18. I was 21. Very young. Too young. Probably not a good idea. But it's worked, and she says she still likes me because I pay her real good. But her and I dated and then got engaged, and then we married. On August 18th, 1990, we got married. I was working at a machine shop in Brownsville, Texas. I went down there and was working, and they put me. I'd made it tested into the machining tool and die maker's apprenticeship program. So I'm operating these high-end machines. I have a lot of experience operating machines, and I love it. And I was sitting at a jig bore. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't be surprised. Very few people know. But a jig bore is a high-tech boring machine that bores a hole. And actually, I'm lying to you. I was sitting right next door to that was a jig grinder. It's a little grinder that you get the part after it's hardened, and it puts the hole exactly in the right spot. It's very cool stuff. I'm telling you, it's the coolest stuff in the world. But go look it up on the YouTube and watch it work. A jig grinder. It's very cool. Anyway, I was working on this machine, sitting there, and they started painting a floor right over here. Just I could see it from where I was sitting, just a few feet from me. I didn't know that the paint they were using on that floor was they called it diisocyanate. It's a combination of xylene and toluene combined in this paint. We found this out later. I'm sitting there for about 2 hours. I was breathing this stuff, and the fellas that were applying it didn't have a mask. After a little while, they got these big respirators, and I'm sitting there operating this machine, not knowing anything. I was the closest one to this open area that was being painted. I got sick. My eyes burned, my lungs burned. I was miserable. I went to my dad, who worked in the same department, but he was away from where they were painting, and he told me to go to the nurse. I went to the nurse. She sent me to a pulmonologist. They checked me out. My lungs were fried. My nose was all burnt up, and it was miserable. I went home 2 months to the day on October 18, 1990. 2 months to the day. My wife had planned a 2-month anniversary meal. I walked into the house and I dropped on the couch. That was it. There was nothing there. I had no, I made you this meal. I don't want nothing. I laid there. I just figured I got some lung chemical burn. It'll be okay. I didn't know, and they really didn't know at the time, that was attacking my central nervous system. And in short order, what happened is my brain started to shut down, and I wasn't working. I wasn't able to breathe. I wasn't able to do much of anything. I struggled, just getting up and walking from one spot to the other, and it just got worse and worse. I couldn't figure out what it was, and then my wife she cleaned the house, or it was later. She did something. We'd been about a month. I'd been off of work for about a month. They couldn't figure out. Doctors couldn't figure out what's going on. And then I went to a gymnasium. My brother was playing basketball, which really wasn't a good sight. Just saying, Ray people probably shouldn't play basketball. We're real short. We're kind of stocky. All we know to do is just bowl people over, and he got fouled out all the time. I did that when I tried basketball. It just doesn't work. But I went and watched him because he's playing basketball. I didn't know they had just painted that floor. We didn't find out till later. And about halfway through the basketball game, probably not even that long, I started having what later they defined as a seizure. I didn't know. I just couldn't function. My hands and arms were flopping all over. I was like a rag doll. I was a 21-year-old dude. I was a pretty healthy dude. I used to ride my bike 8-10 miles to work and back just because. I was a pretty healthy dude. Now I couldn't stand up. Something had control of me. They went to the hospital and ended up for the next 4.5 years trying to figure out what it was. We saw over 30 doctors, finally got a diagnosis. The closest thing I ever got to a diagnosis is that I was hypersensitive to chemicals. So any chemical that someone would use would mess me up. It would cause these seizure-like behaviors, grand mal seizures, where I would pass out and my body would flop all over. I got to the point where I'd go into church just because I was determined to be in church. And somebody said one time, "You only go to church because you're a preacher." Long before I was ever a preacher, I went to church because it's important to me. And I'd go sit in church, and many times halfway through the service, because someone had perfume on or something in the church, no fault of theirs. And many times I would start to have a seizure right there in church house. And just for the record, here's extra for you. Y'all seen my brother, and some of you see the tattoos on him and the piercings, and some people will judge him for that. In the midst of those seizures, my brother's always been bigger and stronger than me. He'd see that. He'd jump up off his pew, and he'd run over, and he'd just sweep me up. He'd pick me up like a baby because I could no longer function. My wife couldn't do anything with me. He'd carry me out to the back seat of the car, and he'd put me in the back seat of the car. Ride with Laura over to the house, and he'd get out of the house and pick me up. And he'd carry me into his house. Just for the record, if you want to make fun of somebody, don't make fun of my brother around me. That's my brother. I love him. You say, well, he's done all that. I don't care what he's done. He's my brother, dude. He's my brother. I love him. Talk about a good heart. There's not many good-hearted, better-hearted people than my brother. Good man. Good man. Over and over again, this happened to the point where I couldn't come to church anymore, and I was trapped. I love what Sam's doing. I love the Facebook Live. I love that people can watch what's going on in church, because there for a long time I couldn't do nothing but sit at home. I love we have a connection somehow. It means something to me. You see, God takes us through different things in our life that we can't fully understand, and we don't understand it. We don't like it. I was living finally, and boy, it did take a couple hours to tell you the whole story of we lost our house. We lost lived at mom and dad's house, and they had we ended up newlyweds out on the living room hide-a-bed. That's all they had. And then we found a hiding place. Their laundry room was real big, so we went and put a mattress down on the laundry room. Get this, we were sleeping in the middle of the night. My wife wakes up, blood-curdling scream. She got attacked by a scorpion. We were in South Texas. They have scorpions in South Texas. It stung her about 4 or 5 times on her, up under her nightgown, on her chest and stomach area. And we ended up in the emergency room. We didn't sleep in that room anymore. We went back to the hide-a-bed. God worked it out, and through there are a lot of different stories I could tell you for sure. God took care of us. For 4.5 years, I lived like that. I was alone, secluded. If I went out, the mask you all wear that I hate wearing, I had a mask, but my mask was nothing like your mask. My mask had about half an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch of charcoal I had to breathe through. You think those are hard to breathe through? I promise you. That was my life. We ended up getting a little place and putting it on mom and dad's property, and we lived right beside mom and dad. One morning I got up. My wife got up. She went to work, but before she went to work, I had another one of these episodes of grand mal seizure. She said, I don't know this. I was on the other side. She said 3 times I quit breathing. I don't know. She'd have to shake me and it'll wake me up. I woke up about noon when finally my body would function. I got up and got myself ready. I went over to mom's house to see what was going on. I wasn't walking good. It hurt. Everything hurt. I went over to mom's house. The phone rang. I picked up the phone and said, hello. There's this young girl on the other side, and she said, hello, is Michael there, my brother? And I said, no, he's not. She said, well, I'm with Hyles-Anderson College, and I'm trying to recruit him to go to college. And she said, I said, yeah, I know about that college. Dad wanted me to go there. And, oh, really? And you didn't go? No, I went to Pensacola. It's nicer weather there. And we talked a little bit about that. She said, well, you sound young enough to go to college. I said, no, get this. I said, no, I'm too old to go to college. I said, she said, well, how old are you? I said, I'm 26. She said, we have a lot of old men like that at the college. You could come. 26, old men. She talked me into it. Molly Studebaker was her name. She's married. I don't remember her married name. She's a good lady. She talked me into signing up. She said, well, your dad said you should go to college. And I said, yeah, and I'll go one of these days, maybe. She said, we got this new thing called a computer. We got this database thing. We can put your name in and start the process. I said, lady, I'm sick. Leave me alone. She bothered me until I put my name, gave her my name and all my information, and she was asking me questions like, when do you come to college? I'm not coming to college. I'm sick. You know, but she was persistent. My name got into their little thing. I called my wife right after that. She laughed at me because I was sick. She said, don't you know, did you tell her you were sick? I said, yeah, I did, but she was persistent. I signed up. That was June 25th, 1995. Why do I remember that date? I don't remember a lot of dates. Why do I remember that date? I haven't had a seizure since that day. God didn't bring down a warm, fuzzy feeling for me. No one blew on my head and knocked me over. I didn't have no one hit me in the head and you're healed. None of that. It wasn't a big service and pomp and circumstance. But I'm 52. I was, 25, 26, 27, probably 26. It's a long time not having a seizure. My mom sat me down shortly after that. I was fixing to go back and sign up and go to work again. I was going to go to work and make some money. My mom said, please don't go to work. So, well, Mom, I got to make some money. She said, I want you to go to college. That all happened surrounding this girl calling you. And I said, Ma, I don't want to go to college. She says, Dusty, she says, I've known you my whole life, or your whole life. And she said, I don't want you to go through what you just went through. Go to college. So I wadded my earthly possessions into a Hyundai Excel. Do you know what that is? Do you know what a Hyundai Accent is? They don't make the Excel anymore. The Accent replaced it. I think the Accent is bigger than the Excel was. We put all we could fit into this little hatchback, and my wife and I drove from South Texas to Indiana. I went to college and went through all the bumps and bruises through college. Right out of college, Brother Keith Feemister, the first pastor here, hired me to come work here. What are you getting at? I promise you, it wasn't a fun time to go through that 4.5-year period. Certainly wasn't a fun time to go through the 5-year period at college. But God had a plan. Because he knew in the year 2021 that a little church on the edge of Murfreesboro out here in the Walter Hill area needed somebody that could go with them through COVID time, through lung conditions, through hurts and injuries that nobody else could understand. And if people call me, I'm not, some pastors, they'll get mad at you. If you don't have a appendage falling off and you're not bleeding profusely, you'd be at church. Y'all know, you've called me before. I've called you, checking on you. I just didn't feel up to it. Well, God bless you. I'm just checking. I'll make sure you're okay. I'm praying for you. Don't you feel ill about them? No, because I wanted to come to church real bad. I couldn't. I know what it feels like. What are you saying, Brother Dusty? I'm saying that the problems and difficulties that God takes us through, he promises, number one, he's going to go with us. And he gives us a bonus. You can use those to help somebody else. If you'll keep your attitude right. How do I do that? I promise you, this is what I did. I got so dark and depressed. I mean, I was depressed, dude. I'm telling you. I know they say Christian. I've heard sermons. If you're depressed, you're not saved. I was depressed, and I knew I was saved. I was depressed. Brother Steve, you know what? I read Job. And you know what? It didn't take but about a chapter and a half in Job to figure out this guy's bummed. And you know what? If you keep reading the book of Job, you're going to find the dude's depressed and dealing with horrific depression after all he's putting up with. And he has his 3 buddies show up and just slap him around for a while till Elihu stands up for him finally. And even Elihu stands up for him, but backhands him in the process of standing up for him just to remind him, hey, there is a God. You forgot that, didn't you, Job? Job's like, kind of. And then God takes over for Elihu and finishes out the book. I read the book of Job, I have no idea how many times. I read it through once, and then I go back and read it through again. And I didn't suffer anything to the magnitude Job suffered, but Job made it. I made it. It's COVID. We have a lot of things that have gone against us just here recently, haven't we? A lot of us are struggling and suffering. I don't know why. But I promise you, number one, he'll be there with you. And number two, he's taking you through something so you can help someone else. If we look at that, now we have purpose for doing what it is we're doing. This life is not a waste, and you're not wasted. I promise you, I don't understand all of it. But the Apostle Paul, in his explanation here, is telling these Corinthian people, hey, y'all think you got it bad? I've had it real bad, but listen, fellas, the reason I had it real bad is to help you. And if we look at life and the troubles that life sends our way and realize that God's with us through them, we can get through them. If we'll bury ourselves in his Bible, I promise you, when you're sitting there alone, I'm telling you, Fox News will depress the fire out of you. It'll tear your heart completely out. If you open your Bible, there's encouragement there. Fox News will show you the bad stuff. Or CNN, if you go there, it doesn't matter. Any of that news stuff, you'll get depressed. It won't take you long. But here's a book that can encourage you. You could read a story about a man named Job who went through so much more than I could ever go through. And if you ever shed tears for, just think of a guy losing his 10 kids like that. Couldn't imagine losing one of mine. He lost 10 of his. One time. But he stayed faithful to God. Truth of the matter is, there's value in what we're going through. Doesn't feel good. But as I stand before you this morning, I'm awful glad I endured that yucky time in my life. And I'm glad God uses those circumstances in my life to bring me here. And maybe in some little way, when I'm sitting there talking to little Bud, and I see him in his sick condition, and I think of him being all down and depressed, maybe because I've been there a little bit, I can encourage his little heart. God's got a purpose for taking us through whatever it is we're going through. Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. Stick with it. You can make it. God will make good come of it. He will. Even if we don't see it, He'll make good come of it. Stick with God. Our Heavenly Father. Just some reminiscing here, reading Paul reminiscing there with the Corinthian people.